Margaret was angry at her son for his continual requests for financial support, but mostly angry with herself for continuing to give him what he asked for. Margaret had always been too generous with her son. It was just her and Kevin after her husband Harold had died in a car accident when Kevin was 8 years old. She thought how she should have had better boundaries with Kevin since he was a child. But she didn't enforce the boundaries she set for him. It took her many years and therapy sessions to realize that she was afraid of losing his love. At 35, Kevin still called her whenever his latest get-rich-quick scheme collapsed or when his gambling debts mounted beyond his part-time salary at the electronics store. Margaret sighed as she pictured the too familiar scenario. The pattern was always the same: the desperate phone call, the elaborate promises about how this time would be different, and Margaret reaching for her checkbook. But she felt different this time. She could tell her emotions were growing colder toward him. She remembered she had promised herself that she was not going to bail him out anymore and had told Kevin the same. His reaction had been one of understanding, but they both knew that Margaret had difficulty sticking to promises, even those she made to herself. Kevin pleaded over the phone on a rainy Tuesday morning. "The cryptocurrency thing didn't work out like I thought, but I've got this new opportunity with a friend's restaurant business." She tried to get more information from Kevin about the restaurant business and how he would be involved. She calmly asked him if he was planning to buy into the business. Was he going to be a silent partner, or a maintenance staff cleaning the restaurant after closing? But as usual, he was vague and insisted he had to get off the phone for an important meeting with his friend. Margaret stared out her kitchen window at the modest garden she'd been tending since her husband died. At 72, she lived on a fixed income, supplemented by the small inheritance Harold had left her. Each bailout for Kevin meant fewer groceries, a delayed roof repair, or skipping her monthly dinner with her book club. "Kevin, this is the 4th time this year," she said quietly. I know, but Mom, if I don't pay my landlord by Friday, I'll be evicted. And Sarah's pregnant, did I mention that? We can't be homeless with a baby coming." Margaret closed her eyes. She hadn't heard about Sarah being pregnant, though she'd learned not to believe everything Kevin told her when he needed money. But what if it was true this time? 2 hours later, she was at the bank, transferring money she couldn't afford to lose. The calls continued through the spring and summer. Kevin's restaurant investment went bust. He crashed his car and needed money for repairs. Sarah left him, she hadn't been pregnant after all, and he needed money for therapy and a security deposit on a smaller apartment. Each time, Margaret's savings dwindled a little more. When Kevin called in November with his biggest request yet, $10,000 for what he claimed was a medical emergency, Margaret was finally ready. "Of course, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm with false sympathy. "This sounds very serious. I'll need to speak with the hospital billing department directly to arrange payment." "What's the name of the hospital again?" Kevin stumbled through a response, clearly making up details as he went. Margaret took careful notes, asking for specific names and phone numbers. "I'll call them first thing tomorrow morning and set up the payment plan," she assured him. "Don't worry about a thing." That evening, Margaret called the hospital Kevin had named. As she expected, they had no record of him as a patient. She called the other hospitals in his area with the same result. The next morning, instead of transferring money, Margaret drafted a letter. She detailed every loan, every lie, every broken promise from the past 3 years. She calculated the total, nearly $40,000. Then she wrote about selling Harold's belongings to keep helping him, about eating soup for dinner, about lying awake at night worried about her own financial future. At the bottom, she wrote, "Kevin, I know about the gambling. I know you were fired. I know there's no medical emergency. I also know that I've been enabling you to avoid growing up. So I'm giving you something more valuable than money, consequences. Figure it out yourself this time. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about getting real help, call me. Until then, the Bank of Mom is permanently closed." She mailed the letter and then did something she hadn't done in months. She went grocery shopping and bought herself a good steak. Kevin called 2 days later, furious and desperate. Margaret let it go to voicemail. He called 17 more times that week. She listened to each message, hearing his anger gradually give way to panic, then to bargaining, and finally to something that might have been the beginning of genuine remorse. 3 weeks later, Kevin showed up at her door. He looked thinner, tired, but also somehow more present than she'd seen him in years. "I got a job," he said quietly. "It's just stocking shelves at a grocery store, but it's honest work." "And I went to a meeting. Gamblers Anonymous." Margaret studied her son's face. For the first time in years, he met her eyes directly. "I'm not asking for money," he continued. "I'm asking if you'll let me take you to dinner. Somewhere nice. My treat. I want to apologize properly, and I want to tell you about the plan I'm making to pay you back. All of it." Margaret stepped aside and let him in. They had a lot to talk about, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was talking to her son instead of to his desperation. Sometimes the greatest kindness looks like cruelty from the outside.